Flying in the clouds has been killing pilots since men and women started to fly. It's been made famous recently by the Kobe Bryant tragedy. We're going to be talking about how to prevent inadvertent IMC in the hangar. Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Millican.
And I'm Christy Wong. Today's episode is brought to you by Wingfield Aviation.
We're going to be talking about inadvertent IMC. Christy, what's IMC?
IMC is Instrument Meteorological Conditions. It means that you're flying in the clouds.
And fog and things like that where you can't see outside.
Can't see.
Joining us today from AT Systems, we have Andre. Andre, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Very nice.
And we
to
have
meet you.
Tyson. Tyson, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right, so guys, we're talking about inadvertent IMC, and let's really jump into the definition of what that is. I mean, especially in light of the Kobe Bryant tragedy, and we're hearing the term spatial disorientation and all that kind of stuff. So what is this?
Well, inadvertent IMC is a term we've used for a long time. The FAA is actually transitioning to UIMC, Unintentional Instrument Meteorological Conditions. You'll hear us use those terms pretty synonymously.
Okay.
Basically, what's happening is a pilot, for whatever reason, is going into an environment where they cannot see their the horizon. Special VFR could be a condition, but not necessarily. As you go into those environments and you start losing those horizons is where that inadvertent piece comes in.
Well, and you mentioned special VFR because in the Kobe Bryant situation, people are hearing that and I don't think they're quite understanding what that is. In special VFR, you're still not allowed to fly into IMC.
Correct. You're just
You
able
still have to maintain visual conditions.
Absolutely, and I think there's confusion, even with pilots, between IMC versus IFR and VMC versus VFR. While they're similar, they are different of the visual flight rules that you fly in versus the actual meteorological conditions, and I think that is kind of lost sometimes.
And let's define some of those letters because some of the people that are watching, maybe they're not pilots, but they're wanting to understand the situation. So when we say VFR, we're talking about visual flight rules. The FAA allows pilots to fly by two different rules. You can either fly by visual rules or you fly by instrument rules. So you hear the term VFR for visual, instrument for will be IFR.
Absolutely, and then along with that, you have the conditions that denote what flight rules you're flying under.
Instrument conditions or visual conditions.
Absolutely.
So a helicopter can fly at a half-mile visibility and clear clouds in special VFR, which is much lower than what an airplane can fly at. Right. The other, I won't say cause, but problem, why this is more prevalent in the helicopter community is helicopters inherently unstable at low airspeeds. So when you fly in that half-mile clear cloud environment, you're going to slow your aircraft way down. You're probably going to be, coming down closer to the surface so that you can see more obstacles, keep your orientation. So unlike airplanes that request special VFR, when a helicopter requests special VFR, half-mile clear clouds. Half-mile visibility, if you've never flown it, it's your IMC. I mean, half mile is nothing.
Right.
I think that there's a question out there in the pilot community, how could this happen? You get into a situation, it's cloudy or foggy or low visibility. When does it become, VMC and then all of a sudden, oops, I'm in the clouds. Did you not see it coming kind of thing?
It tends to be a gradual transition. And that actually is part of where our training has gone wrong over the years. Is we've trained it where it's instant, and that's not what really causes the problem when you start talking about spatial disorientation, some of the illusions. So it tends to happen gradually.
So it's the frog in water.
It is.
Okay.
The other challenge that comes into that and which creates this problem is that no one has been effectively trained because the current methods are inadequate. We're using simulators that they have the ability to create visual illusions, but they lack the ability to create vestibular illusions.
Right.
So before we get going, let's take a step back. There's IMC, which is a condition, and then there's spatial disorientation, which is the root cause of the accident.
Absolutely.
And they're tied together, but we want to make sure we're not saying that IMC causes the accident.
Right. IMC is the condition. of the situation, but the pilot
forces
experience.
the pilot to come back inside on his instruments. And it's that transition from using your visual system to get your spatial orientation, and then transitioning down into your instruments, and how quickly you can make that transition, and how your mind associates what they're seeing on the instruments. And that's where the spatial disorientation that Tyson's about to talk about, it really it affects your motor skills and your cognitive ability.
How big of a problem is it?
About $100 million a year in civil aviation to helicopters.
Just to helicopters?
On average. Yes.
Just the helicopters?
Damage?
Just the helicopter community.
To aircraft, to loss of aircraft equipment, personnel, overall loss to the civil market in the United States, it averages $100 million a year.
And just to be clear, you guys fly both fixed wing and helicopters.
Correct.
Yes, we're both
Wow.
qualified in both.
I kind of joke that the greatest thing that a helicopter can do is hover. The worst thing a helicopter can do in this condition is hover. So like Andre alluded earlier, a helicopter pilot is going to slow down because we can. The faster I go, the faster the world's coming at me. The slower I go, the more I can see and start addressing. So the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to slow down. Helicopters are inherently unstable. Depending on your platform, you may have some automatic flight control systems, some things that help a little bit, but not necessarily going to help you stay in trim and those types of things. So as we start slowing down, we're going to pitch our nose up. That's how a helicopter flies. So already I have a horizon that may or may not be that visible to begin with. When you pitch your nose up, you're further removing yourself from being able to see that horizon, because now I'm pointing my nose, if you will, I'm pointing it toward that fog, that cloud, so I'm going to lose that horizon. So that's where the next step really, this is where the problem starts. I'm already nose high pitch attitude because I'm slowing back. I'm slow, making the aircraft less stable.
Decelerating. So it's a decelerating attitude. So you're pitching the nose up to start decelerating the aircraft. So now you're decelerating the aircraft.
And I don't want to say unusual attitude because it's not an unusual attitude. It's an abnormal attitude. That's not our normal flight profile. At that point, a couple different things can happen. Either the pilot continues to fight and stay outside, and we can cite examples of that happening, or the pilot transitions inside. But let's talk about that transition, because I've had the question after the Kobe Bryant accident, I've had that question, I can't even count how many times. We were at Heli Expo that next week, and it just kept coming up. Why can helicopter pilots not fly IFR? That's not the problem. Excuse me. Helicopter pilots can fly IFR. We don't see helicopters falling out of the sky regularly, yet we fly instruments all the time.
All the time.
So it's not a matter of flying IFR. It's the transition between the visual flight and the instrument flight. So what's happening, we'll just use a little scenario. So we've already talked, we're going to slow down, we're going to go down, which now we're closer to the Earth. We've got that nose-high attitude. We pick up a false horizon, creates that visual illusion. That visual illusion, because the vision system makes up 80% of your sensory for your orientation, it can convince your ears. And a good example of this is if I put you in a simulator, you're fully engrossed in the scenario. You feel like you're moving, you're turning, everything's going, right until the time you turn around and look behind you. And immediately your brain cages. The reason your brain cages is because your vestibular system is not involved in this process. It takes 20 seconds of motion, according to the FAA, 20 seconds of motion to actually create illusions in the vestibular, the inner ear system. So as we transition now, we have visual illusions with that false horizon. The ears have gotten on board because the eyes convinced it. Now we go, uh-oh, this isn't going to work. Now we transition inside. This is the first time a pilot has experienced that confusion. The brain is having to process two pieces of information, which it's never done at the same time before. In a simulator, it's processed visual illusions, and when you look inside, immediately your brain cages because there's no conflicting information. I can go out as an instrument instructor, I can go out, close your eyes, put you in the leans, and I can demonstrate the leans, John F. Kennedy's accident. So I can demonstrate independently those two things. The missing training piece is the fact that I can't create visual and vestibular illusions in either of those conditions. So going back to our accident sequence, this is the first time the brains process this data, both visual and vestibular, where they're conflicting. That turns the brain in what's fast brain, slow brain. Fast brain is that intuitive action. So we preach delay intuitive action. But the problem is the brain's not capable of doing it because the brain has not been trained to delay intuitive action. High stress situations, we've all seen the stress curve of performance. We're well past that. We were talking earlier about the IMC video with the fixed wing.
Right.
And he was very scared. His brain was certainly well past that stress level. So this instance, the first time the brain's getting conflicting information, the brain starts, I won't say shutting down, but slowing down for sure, which speeds up the processes of making decisions, because it's not going through the slow brain side, which is taking in information and making a decision. It's instantly making decision. It is not delaying intuitive action. When you look at these accidents, and we can cite all you want, the California accident a few weeks ago, 8,000-hour pilot. The Army crashed a Black Hawk UH-60 Mike helicopter off the coast of Florida in 2015, 8,000-hour pilot on the flight controls. They crashed one in Hawaii in 2017, 2,300-hour pilot. It's not flight time, it's not instruments, it's the transition period and the fact that no pilot has been trained to deal with the vestibular and visual confusion and the fast brain response to these conditions.
So how do we do that? What is the solution to being able to do that?
The answer is to put them in the aircraft. And you'll hear our term is degraded visual environment. It's an Army term, but it describes the environment. It's any environment that's visually degraded, regardless. It could be a dust landing. It could be fog. It doesn't matter the obscurity. It could be
A dust landing.
For the Army and for the military, we land into dust a lot. So,
Okay, and I'm thinking, helicopters and
Yeah.
oh, that's
We
interesting.
kick up the dust, and then
Now you can't see where the ground
we can't
is.
see where the
Either or
ground
anything.
is.
So this is something that a Texas fixed-wing pilot wouldn't necessarily encounter.
it's, I always joke if anyone ever says that they like dust landings, they're crazy or lying. It doesn't matter which one, because
So it's an issue.
scary.
It's a problem.
It's very
Okay.
And
scary.
snow landings is also a
Okay.
problem.
Absolutely.
See, I'm learning something.
Yes, I do want to take a step back and talk about, we're kind of discussing the differences between fixed wing and helicopters, and the what brings on the spatial disorientation. So the inner ear, the vestibular system has fluid in a semicircular canals that are lined up in the pitch, the roll, and the yaw axis. As well as an otolith organ that is excited when you decelerate or accelerate or climb or descend. In an airplane, in a fixed wing, they're inherently stable. If I have everything trimmed up, I can take my hands off the controls, it will continue to fly. So if I inadvertently go into the IMC conditions, if I do nothing, the plane continues to fly. I have a couple minutes, I can try to cage my brain on the instruments and take a few seconds and say, okay, I'm climbing, my airspeed's okay, my wings are level. In a helicopter, once we've slowed down and descended, both my feet, my collective and my cyclic are all moving. I'm trying to remain in control of the aircraft. And it requires all four controls all the time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
so
I
they
hadn't thought
can't
about
just
that.
let go.
And that would be why it's so much harder in a helicopter.
We can't just let go and then try to make sense of the information. The aircraft won't fly on its own. So that fast brain that Tyson talked about, we fly instinctually. We do it at a hover with our eyes. We're constantly making small inputs based on what we see in our field of view. But as we're slow and we lose our visual and we come inside, our brain is immediately relying on my vestibular system. It's telling my body, am I still turning? Am I not turning? Maybe I was in a constant rate turn trying to do a 180 back out of the environment, and the fluid, it came back down and centered. So my brain is telling my body I'm level. But yet I'm in a turn.
Okay.
So when I do transition, I finally lose the visual environment. I transition, my brain's saying you're level, and my attitude indicator's like this. So now I got to decide, is my attitude indicator failing? Okay, now I've got to look at and I'm going to make an intuitive reaction, and it may be in the opposite direction. And now I'm watching the attitude indicator go even further. Now you got to take into account half-mile clear clouds, which means we can come down to 20 feet off the trees if we have to. We have some pictures of helicopters following roads 10 feet above the power lines just trying to get to where they're going. And in that environment, one wrong input and it's unrecoverable in a helicopter.
And most of these accidents, if you look historically at them, whether it be Army or civilian, less than 30 seconds. And most of them are more in the neighborhood of 15 to about 22 or 23 seconds from the time the pilot clearly becomes spatially disoriented and the time of the accident. How do we train it?
Yeah, how do we fix this?
How do
We
we
have to
fix
put
it?
people in aircraft in an environment that we can degrade the visual environment. We can create, it's not good or bad vision. It's limited vision. So by putting them in an aircraft and giving them, say, a mile visibility or half-mile visibility, we're creating an environment conducive to that visual illusion. The body's going to do the rest for us as long as we're in the aircraft, because all the forces are acting on the aircraft. I take a system that creates a restricted visual, which creates the visual illusion. And then, just like I said earlier, the vestibular system's going to get on board, going to get confused, and then create that overall overwhelming sense in the brain. In an aircraft, and for anyone who's been in a simulator, they're great training devices.
Absolutely.
I've never been scared in a simulator. I've red screened more than I care to share, but I've never been scared. The opposite is true. You put someone in an aircraft, it doesn't matter how many times you've done it in a simulator. It's different. It's more nervous.
real.
There's a human factor.
It's real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the human factor is a big part of this. It's decision-making skills. It's your ability to correct the aircraft at the proper time. And right now, the answer has always been they need more instrument time. They need more simulator time. So we continually put these people back in the simulator. And even a full motion simulator still works in a 1G environment. You can't create Gs in a simulator. You can drop a side, you can raise the nose, and you can drop the other side. But the fluid in the ear isn't getting pushed to the outside, and then at a constant rate, it settles back even when you're still in that maneuver. And then when you snap out of it, it thinks you're in the opposite turn.
So are we talking blindfolds then? We should put our students in blindfolds and then put them in
Well, we
the
use
airplane.
foggles right now in the fixed wing. I mean, I don't know what you guys do in helicopters.
We use the same thing, but again, that's either an on or off environment.
Right.
Okay.
So you know when you're going to put the foggles on. There's no fear, there's no anxiety, there's no miscues between. You have them off,
Right.
you put them on, now you're on the instruments.
And there's no transition. There's no decreased visibility. You either have visibility or you don't.
Right.
Right.
There's
And
no
the key
way
is
to-
that degraded
So how do you fix
visibility.
that?
That's what actually started our company. After 2015, when the Army crashed off of Florida, we started designing this system. Andre and I are both military pilots.
Okay, no, that's foggles.
Yeah.
We built it to work off the HGU 56, but we actually have a system to use it for those folks that don't wear helmets in their operations. But
Oh, my goodness.
What you'll find is, again, it's not on-off like foggles. We can set the visibility.
I see it, like it's kind of fading in and out here.
Absolutely. And we can set visibility basically anything from clear down to a half mile. We also can train dust landing, so we really can go a lot shorter than a half mile. As we transition, we we can go down
We
to
can train
any-
inadvertent IMC, or dust/snow landings.
So when you break out, it's not over, and you can't roll your foggles up and say, "Hey, just go land and let's
Right,
go home."
because you still have visibility to
You still
deal
have visibility.
with.
So
Okay.
not only do you have to find the runway and land, you're going to have to figure out where you're parked too.
So it hits that critical transitioning phase, not only just transitioning from visual to the instruments, but transitioning back from instruments to visual. You want to put this on, Christy?
I kind of do.
Can she do that?
Oh my gosh.
Let's move the mic out of the way here.
There we go. So the easiest thing is if you take your hands right there on those ear cups.
You got
And
it.
just put it over your head. There
Okay.
you go.
Tyson, can you pull it down just a little bit further? So we put some safety features into the helmet.
Oh, my.
We put some safety features into the helmet that allow us to control when the aircraft. Our goal is for you to understand what spatial disorientation feels like, what it feels like when it comes on, and how difficult it is to transition to the instruments and overcome that feeling.
Okay.
So we had to develop some safety features because we're trying to get you out of control. So we've developed some
Disoriented.
Disoriented.
Not necessarily out of control.
I apologize.
But with the disorientation, the risk is being out of control. In this, success by our definition is you become spatially disoriented and you fight through those
Are you trying
illusions
to make me
and
throw
confusions.
Up? Like,
Is that really
could be
making
a
you
case.
sick?
That could be a case. When we take this training back into your aircraft, your office space, the one that you're comfortable with, it becomes real pertinent training that is realistic and
Scenario-based.
scenario-based.
Christy, how does it feel in there?
I mean, it's not uncomfortable. It's actually oh, what is that?
So this, if this picks up that the aircraft has banked too far,
Whoa,
yes, it's going to.
there's something happening.
There we go.
what's
It goes
happening?
clear.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, okay. So
Okay.
it goes clear and it actually will flip up.
Ooh.
There it goes. And it comes out of your field of view.
And the reason for that is
Okay, so if you bake too much and you've basically failed,
Yes.
at least it pops up immediately and you can.
absolutely.
But the accident that spurred us, they had a simulator on their installation. They had 8,000 hours. They were in the simulator all the time. So we started asking the question, well, if the simulator doesn't fix it, why doesn't the simulator fix it? And then we started to go down the road of spatial disorientation, the vestibular system, and we realized that without that 8 to 12 seconds of acceleration, deceleration, you're not getting that confusion
I'm just
between.
feeling how heavy it is. Sorry.
Most of that weight is that
You're not-
helmet. This piece, and it's magnetic, so it breaks away.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah,
You can
that's
feel
not
how
bad.
heavy this piece is.
These are like the foggles of the future. I love it.
Boggles of the future.
Again, we just don't crash airplanes or helicopters in IFR conditions, in IMC conditions. It's the transition.
Right.
That's the focus for us.
All right, so let's run Christy through a little bit of what happens here.
So-
and Christy, you tell us what you're experiencing while he does.
So we're going to start just completely clear, but that's not realistic because very seldom do you go from clear blue 22 to, oh my gosh.
Okay.
And if you do, there's probably a thunderstorm that's accompanying
And you
it.
just flew into it, yeah.
But the
What are you
visibility
doing?
definitely
Dan, give me
changes.
the leans. Give me the leans. Push me. Yeah, there we go.
The visibility definitely changes.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up during Heli Expo was
Oh.
we take off at 1,003.
Okay.
So what do you
So
saying?
it started off clear, and now it's just gradually getting worse and worse. So it's the frog in water. It wasn't clear, and now blank. I'm in the clouds. It's actually just slowly progressing to where it's getting thicker.
Now, if you're in the aircraft and you're focusing on whatever you consider your horizon, and you pick up that false horizon, there's the visual illusion that's going to
Yeah.
lead to everything else.
A road, a hill.
Right.
Roads don't always stay straight. You may follow it for 15 minutes, and by following the road, your wings are level. But then the road starts to turn to the left, and you're not looking at your instruments, you're watching the road. And now you've started a very slow left turn to continue to follow that road.
We don't want to make pilots more comfortable to fly in these conditions. That's not our goal. Our goal is to scare them to realize that they do not want to fly in these conditions. We want them to make the better decision before they take off. We want them to make a better decision when the weather does start deteriorating more than they anticipated, to make a decision at that point, commit to instruments, stop flying. Helicopters can land anywhere. They're fantastic.
Oh, it
to
just
make
got
that,
worse.
To make that decision early on, then the spatial disorientation, then the recovery through the process.
But one of the problems with continuing to train in the simulator is, in the simulator, we go through this environment, and we go from visual to instruments, and we look down, and we immediately, right the aircraft and climb out, and we're told, you did a great job. You're properly trained. So when the weather does get bad, you go,
I
I've been
got
doing this for 10 years. I've done these 1,000 times in a simulator.
Hold my beer.
Exactly. It's that overconfidence. If we can train every pilot to experience spatial disorientation, understand how disorienting it is, and how it affects cognitive ability to really take that information that the instrument panel is giving you, then they'll make better decisions about flying in Scotia weather.
I am now no longer able to make out Tyson or Andre's faces. So
But you could a minute ago.
I could just, not that long ago, and it's just very slowly, okay. I think
gave you
that's
back a
Andre.
little bit.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, I gave you back a little bit.
The other focus, and I had mentioned the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team, one of the things the team has worked on is, and talked about and continues to work on, is realistic scenario-based training. So our system, not to go into all the details of it, but is designed around scenario-based. One of the things we take real-world accidents and recreate them.
Wow.
So you pick an accident scenario.
Oh my goodness.
And then there's a short description of the accident scenario.
The forecast was wrong. Yeah,
The instructor can either brief this before the flight and talk to the student about what they're going to go out and do,
That's so
or
cool.
just run it, let the student successfully complete it, come back, debrief with the station, explain that you just went through the same thing that this aircraft did, this aircraft crashed.
And that was our focus, is we did not want to attach anything to the aircraft.
Okay.
We could go put this, I wouldn't advise this. We could go put this in your car, drive around.
Let's do it. Safety pilot.
Absolutely. So it's absolutely standalone of the airframe itself.
Okay.
So we're not pulling any data to get what we need. This with the scenario-based training, the reason we chose real-world accidents is pilots tend to be type A personalities.
No.
Generally
No,
speaking.
really?
I know. I will just tell you that if I do not complete an iteration correctly, Andre, as my instructor, has failed me because it's not my fault. We took real-world accidents because it's not our opinion at that point. This accident killed someone. This happened. There were fatalities. Here's how it developed. That way, the pilot, if they don't do well, very quickly goes, oh, that really is how that would have happened. There's also some other things that are available so that you can recreate training scenarios based on your mission. If you're an EMS operator, search and rescue operator, you can cater it to your exact mission set.
I want to add that the human factors aspect that we talked about earlier, we talked about it with a psychologist, and it's a relatively well-known fact that the longer you spend trying to accomplish something, the more you want to accomplish it. So if we can develop a scenario over 15, 20 minutes before, you lose your vision or we start bringing it down, there's that much more human drive. You know what? I'm only 5 miles away from the airport.
I can do this.
I can make it. Instead of I'm going to turn around, or you know what, this weather's moving in, it's supposed to be here for the next 3 days. Do I really want to sit in this lady's yard for the next 3 days? I need to make it. I need to try to get there. Or if you're an EMS pilot, you've already picked up your patient, and now you've seen the patient, and the nurse and the medic are working on the patient saying, hey, how long till we get to the hospital? It creates that sense of urgency, that human factor that drives us, whether it be someone in the back that is paying us to get them to a location, or a child that needs to be at a hospital. Those human factors all come into account, but we have no way to put them into use, because when you sit in a simulator, all those human factors go away.
This sounds like a very creative solution to a big industry problem.
We think so.
So for us GA pilots who want to train to avoid spatial disorientation, how would we get something like this? Is this something you're just selling to schools and that they use? How would it work? How would I get to use this?
We're actually working on, and we're actually real close to, a design for what we call our non-helmeted market, because there are helicopter operators that don't wear helmets, tour operators, the oil platforms, offshore stuff,
Right.
They don't wear helmets. So we're currently finalizing that design to make it available both to helicopters, which is our focus because that's where the problem is, but it'll be available to the civil market as well. Excuse me, the GA fixed wing market. Yes, sir.
Just promise me that if you use Foggles of the Future, you'll at least, give me credit.
Foggles of the future.
We will bring a pair for you to try.
Okay, cool.
All right, very good. Well, guys, listen, I really appreciate you coming out.
Oh, this has been incredible.
She's going to walk out with that,
I hope we shed some light on the situation.
Thank you very much. And if we can, if I can, we try to do this every time we teach a class. We believe our device is the answer to this problem, or at least a step in the direction. But the one thing we'd like to leave with is make sure the pilots understand the limitations in their training. If you're training in a simulator, you're not getting vestibular. If you're training in the aircraft without something similar to this, where we limit your visibility, you're not getting the visual illusions. In no condition are you getting the visual vestibular confusion and thus the fast brain, slow brain problem. That's the root cause that's leading to these accidents. So as a chief pilot, as an instructor pilot, understanding the limitations of our training is just as important. So make sure we understand where our training lacks to make that better decision. Like I said, we believe our device does both of those and believe it's the step. But for those that don't want to do it, is understanding that limitation is critical.
Awesome.
Okay, so there you have it. As pilots out there, that's a really big point, not just in IMC, but is understanding your own training limitations and making better decisions. So thanks for watching, and we really appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.
In the hangar.